you're really not sure, are you? Like,
Yeah,
is
it's
this
just
bad or is this good?
yeah. There's
Hello?
something. There's something wrong with it.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's got that kind of bad fermentation. Unless it's meant to be, I just do not like saisons.
Oh no, get out, please. Out the door.
You are a big fan?
I am partial to them. I'm not a massive fan of, just glasses of bubble gum, if you know what I mean, and that kind of slight crazy triple end and just all a bit bonkers. I'm more into that kind of Ardennes French border kind of farmhouse field saisons and stuff like that. I think that's where one of my kind of love is at. Just crispy boys, dry, crisp. Not too alcohol heavy.
Yeah.
Hot and clean all day long.
Little spicy.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that peppery note running through it, just amazing. Or don't have one on tap right now, but always try and have one on tap.
I like wild beers.
Fucking hell, no wonder the price of CO2 is going up.
Yeah. I reckon he's got enough gas there.
I'm not sure. If it was a little bit of a
Well, hello, YouTube. We are here. We are here indeed. So, I'll do the intro, boys.
Nice.
Thanks
There
for
we
that.
go.
It's a strong intro.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 52 of the Hop Addition podcast. And today we are joined by none other than the man who won our competition with an excellent beer, it has to be said. It is Martin Hoddinot. Hence, we have named this podcast Hoddy on the Poddy. I can't remember who.
Good evening, gents. Good evening. How
No.
are we?
Hello.
Evening.
I can't remember who it was who first coined that. I think it was Owen.
No,
Probably.
I think it was one of our listeners, Brett.
Well, that's cool. We'll go
It was
with that.
Brett
one.
Harmon.
Okay, so first of all, just want to say a big thank you to our sponsor, Brewcake Tap. It's been a while since any content's gone live on YouTube because we've all been having a bit of a break. Some of us have been having a slight mental breakdown. Other than that, we're back and we're ready to rock and roll. And we've got some great content coming up for you guys over the next few weeks. And I want to say a big shout out to our Patreons because you guys are literally keeping us going. We have a new Patreon. Oh, he's
Yep,
dying.
keep going.
Is there? We have a new Patreon, Ron Muir, who joined us, and Aussie Rob. I'm going to give him a shout because he's an Aussie and it's an awesome name, Aussie Rob. You can currently see at the bottom of the screen all of our Patreons scrolling across the bottom, including the Swedish chef himself, Thomas, the Hitman Hughes, and Big Banana, to name just a few. But thank you very much for your continued Patreonage, guys. It really is helping us to take this pod places. We really appreciate you. As per usual, if there's any questions in the chat, oh, Gary Hughes is alive. The Hitman's there himself. If there's any comments that come up that I think are worthy of being talked about, then I will stick them up on the chat and we'll give them some attention. But short of that, welcome. Martin, oh, he's leaving. He's leaving us. Oh, no, he's back. He's back.
No, I'm back.
Martin is
Back.
here, and yeah, let's do the usual. What are we drinking? And just get this bit out of the way, shall we?
Whoa.
Yeah. Should we let Martin go first?
Absolutely.
And then
Absolutely.
I think- Yep.
Wow, what am I drinking? So it's got to be said, the dregs of the winning beer. Funny.
Well, hey.
I
Oh,
managed
right.
to fill-
So,
yeah, it's still
So
going.
well,
I filled 2 kegs. Yeah, I filled 2 kegs.
oh,
so,
nice, nice.
but yeah, no, that's what I'm drinking. It's not too bad. It's probably past its best, if I'm honest, but
Yeah.
no sign of oxidation. Obviously, nice and clean. Hops are still where they should be, but it's just that little bit past its best. Still kept the nice haze to it, which I'm quite pleased about.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you have a beer in keg and you have it in the keg for a while, even with that just not moving, just staying still, slowly turns into a clear kind of pale ale West Coast kind of after a while. So yeah, no, really happy with it. Just hanging on to just like the summer, I think today, just hanging on to those last few bits. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Summer has stayed around, which I'm very delighted with, especially up here.
Was it like 3 degrees? 3 degrees up where you are?
There's no snow yet.
No snow. No. Not
The
quite
rain isn't
winter.
quite at that angle. It's that angle. So that means
Yeah.
it's like still summer.
The White
Still tit
Walkers.
suit then.
The White Walkers haven't made an appearance yet, so we're okay.
So just keep the wall up, mate. You'll be fine.
We'll keep defending.
Chris, what are you drinking?
One.
Sorry, I was muted because I was fiddling with something in the background, as I always do.
Whoa,
Excuse me.
hang on a minute. Whoa.
Got to
what
find
she
those
said.
damn baby wipes. So I am drinking, to follow on from the often referred to N-word by Richie Brooks. I've been producing a series of beers, series meaning 2 currently, but another 4 in the works. And this is the A-word squared, as I've called it. Now, this is a single hopped Amarillo beer with quite a lot of Amarillo in it. It's a very basic Marisotta and Carapils base.
Okay.
Beautiful clarity, as you can see.
Mm.
For those of you who aren't watching on YouTube, you're missing out because that is crystal.
That was the first thing I commented on, Chris, when I seen that. I was like, the clarity is insane.
Yeah, it is beautiful, and it's only been in the keg for a little while. Now, the reason why I'm drinking this beer is number one because it's smashable, and I'm just in the mood to get wasted, which is not good because I'm going to drive to work tomorrow. But yeah, it's always the train, isn't there? But the main thing about this beer that I will say is the fruit flavors that are coming through, and it's pure Amarillo, are just magical. They're not like, and I've drunk your beer, Hoddy, so I can say this. They're not punching me in the face like his beer was.
Yeah.
It's it's more subdued, so you get more of the malt. You get that tinge of sweetness. Very basic, very basic yeast. I think I used London Ale, the Lalman London in this. But the fruit flavors that are coming through are just enough to balance really well with the malt. And you're getting a couple
like
of
orange
fruity
rind and stuff like that as well. Kind of like
tangerine.
the orange rind you get from Amarillo. I get orange rind. I know what you mean with tangerine, but I get that kind of pithy kind of orange rind.
I get
It's
pine.
not quite as
pine,
bitter.
Chris.
Say again.
Pine.
Right on the end, right on the end. But it's more. I'm getting more of like. I know it's often used, but it's a melange. It's an umbongo type of beer.
Okay.
But with a definite pithy. Well, maybe not pithy. More Seville orange than Valencia orange. You'll know that if you're a marmalade fanatic like my wife is. But there's a definite difference between the two. It's just a really nice kind of well-rounded, very, very good tasting beer.
Good.
I'm happy with it. In fact, that's going on the rebrew list. I'm fucking ecstatic with that beer, I'll be honest.
Obviously, we can all expect beer mail for that one then, I assume.
You absolutely can, mate.
Of course.
Good.
Hold
Who doesn't love beer now?
Was that a pig that just saw flow?
Yeah, don't hold your breath.
No, seriously, the bottles are already on order.
I look forward to it, Chris. I look forward to it. What are we drinking then, guys?
The three of us.
The three of us are on the same thing, aren't we? So,
Cows.
somebody else introduce this because I forgot the name.
One of our listeners.
Shit.
One of our listeners reached out. Go on.
That's
Andy.
it, Cal. It was on the tip of my
Cal
tongue.
Cal sent in a Belgian IPA, and I think it was a combination of hops and bitter orange peel was put into it. So yeah, it's when I first tasted it, I thought, is this some sort of crazy saison thing? Because there was a lot of phenolics coming off it, and I was like, I hope it is. Otherwise, something's went seriously wrong. But I was glad to see that it is actually a Belgian IPA. So, Owen, I don't know, you want to go through the flavours that you were picking up?
First off, I can't say I've drunk that many Belgian IPAs. Thanks first off to Cal for sending the beer in. I know he had a couple of concerns about beer, I guess.
Yeah.
The message that he sent. I think on the nose, you definitely like what's coming through as like that slightly peppery phenolic vibe. I think the color is, it's got good clarity. It's a, brownish hue.
It's like, I would say kind of orangey, an orangey kind of
quite a deep amber, orangey thing.
Yeah.
Brown was probably not the best description for that color. But
yeah, real.
Yeah, it never conjures good thoughts, does
Delicious
it?
brown IPA.
I've got a brown beer. But I am picking up a fermentation floor on the nose, which is just a hint of acetaldehyde, which for anyone that's not familiar with that compound, it's generally produced due to poor fermentation or yeast health. So keep an eye on pitch rates, or if you're using a wet yeast that has been hanging around for a while, make sure you do a yeast starter, try and get it as fresh as possible, and do everything you can.
Pulling the beer off the yeast a little bit too early can also contribute to that a bit as well. So that's another thing to watch out for on that.
It's a compound that is reabsorbed or cleaned up by the yeast later on in fermentation. And yeah, it's tricky, quite rightly pointed out. I think beginning a cold crash too soon or pulling the beer off too soon, it just doesn't allow that yeast to reabsorb it.
Yeah.
And I think it's being slightly accentuated by the peppery note on the nose. So it's kind of making that just a little bit raspy. But overall, I think the beer's really well balanced.
Yeah, the flavour's good. It's got that kind of nice, the orange sort of thing comes out well. Yeah, yeah. Nice malt.
I think one of the things I would imagine is not so easy to nail is the grist on a beer like this. I think it would probably be quite easy to overdo those specialty malts and end up with a bit of a wonky kind of malt flavour. But actually, this malt's relatively subdued.
Yeah, it's nice.
I don't know what you think, Triggy.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at the colour of it, you'd probably say there is a bit of specialty malt going on in there to sort of give it that more deep kind of amber hue, but it doesn't seem to carry across as a, overly sweet or, crystal heavy kind of flavour or anything like that on there. So, yeah, I mean...
There's a nice sweetness to it, though.
It's the malt flavour, I think, is nice. It does balance out that kind of orangey bitterness as well. Did you say it was orange peel as well?
Yeah.
So I think that can give it quite a sharp sort of bitterness sometimes as well. So I think it does help to balance that out. Not too sure sort of what, as far as hopping goes, kind of how that's coming in. So I think maybe it's just a little... I think Cal was a bit concerned about there being a little bit too much going on there, and maybe it's slightly sort of hidden the hops a little bit with everything else that's happening in that beer. But it's a Belgian IPA, so I think it's always a bit difficult to really get good kind of hop expression when it's underneath a really expressive phenolic kind of Belgian like yeast flavor as well. So
do you think it's bottle conditioned, or do you think it's been filled from a keg? Or
I think it's a keg. It's probably off the keg.
Yeah,
there wasn't much in the way of sediment and stuff, and it was in a plastic bottle. So
it was definitely off the keg, because he said he bottled the rest of it off the keg.
Right.
There you go.
It's just I find with some of those kind of beers, and this kind of goes against everything that a lot of people do with those kind of beers. Sometimes they can actually really benefit from being bottle conditioned.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because
it could have cleaned itself up.
Exactly, and you can kind of leave it that little bit longer, and just the way you get that kind of culture almost go on with the yeast and the malt and everything within that bottle, and then obviously it then reduces any issues with oxidization with filling bottles, which I'm sure we'll talk about at a homebrew level or entering comps and stuff like that. And there's not very often I'll say it's probably might be better bottle conditioned, but in those sort of beers, I think it's definitely worth considering.
It definitely makes for a smoother drinking experience when you bottle condition a beer like that, rather than taking it off the keg, putting it in the post, there not being enough yeast. You end up with the fermentation flaws showing through, which necessarily aren't fermentation flaws from the original fermentation. There may be flaws that are a result of secondary fermentation due to the temperature fluctuations during transport. So, yeah,
that's
definitely
true. That's very true. It's a really good point. I think to your point, Hoddy, is keeping in line with tradition, I guess, is a majority of Belgian beers are bottle conditioned, don't they? Ultimately,
it's a style thing, isn't it? Right, and the malt bill and everything that goes with it, and the yeast is over time. It's focused towards that kind of beer, so. It's always worth just kind of bearing that in mind with any kind of style you're making. Like in New England, these hazy hoppy pale ales, get it in a keg, get it away from the oxygen as soon as physically possible. But some of those, definitely in a bottle.
Yep.
I think also
talk about the
things... Go on.
I'll go. I think as far as like the carbonation goes for like really highly carbonated beers, I think I've seen people talk about it being better to give you a sort of finer carbonation when you're aiming for those quite high CO2 volumes as well. I guess the trade-off with that is sometimes it can be a bit difficult to, if you do end up with too much sediment or whatever in the bottle, to avoid the, snow globe effect of sort of floaty yeast bits flying around in it when it goes off. So there's a little bit of a balancing act there as far as,
and let's be honest, everyone hates bottling.
And that is the main problem.
Being faced with 40 bottles and you're like, I've got to clean these, the big tree. And the wand, and
I'm trying to think how many times I actually did it before, because I was an early adopter of kegging, so I'm sure I probably bottled maybe 2 big batches, and that was it. Whereas Dale, one of my mates, he's stuck with it. He's still doing it. Like the whole bottling thing, absolute nutter.
Yeah, I must have gone maybe like about eight batches or something like that, maybe 8 or 10, and I was like, nah. Get me some of those kegs. Oh,
I was just lucky. But I was at a brewery. I ordered a case of beer, and I went and chatted to him. Says I was a home brewer and all that, and he was like, "Oh, here, take this corner keg." I was like, "Okay, thank you."
That's the result.
Winner.
It's always the same with you, Andy, isn't it? Somebody gives you something or you buy something, and then you have to rebuild your entire house to make it work.
I had to buy a keg.
I've heard these stories. Yeah. I've heard this.
Oh, mate, don't, because we'll get into it at some point. But just to step back a little moment and go back to something that Martin was talking about, which is the carbonation. Sorry, Tricky was talking about with the carbonation level required for Belgian beers and things like that. You only have to look at the bottles that Belgian beers come in. I mean, most of them are like a 1/4 inch thick. They look like they could take down a Panzer tank if you threw it at it. These are hardcore, very well-engineered bottles. And I have to say that when I was bottling, my favourite bottles to use were always the Rheinbacher bottles from Aldi. Because they were built to last, mate. They were proper hardcore bowls.
Because they reuse them as well, don't they? In Germany,
yeah.
So they don't want them to get smashed easily, because they have to go back through the system again.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
and he's had bottle bombs, like the glass exploding.
I've had a few.
I've never had that. I've seen loads of pictures, but I've never had it. Luckily, touch wood.
I had one where I'd taken it back. It was Dell that gave me the bottle. I put it on the table, and it must have just got a little bit too warm because it was in the car on the way back. Put it on the table. It exploded, and there was a shard stuck in the actual roof of the kitchen.
Oh God!
Fucking hell.
Oh,
skills.
Scary.
Do you reckon anyone's ever been killed by a bottle bomb?
Severely injured.
I would be surprised if somebody hasn't had a slashed carotid.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
You know.
Yeah,
a bottle of beer.
It's not worth it, right?
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Can you imagine like the crime scene investigation for that when they're trying to figure out what's gone on? And there's just homebrew like dead on the floor, right? Pool of blood, smashed bottle. And somebody's just going like, what the fuck has gone on here? Like,
if you ever watched any CSI episodes, I guarantee you there is in a CSI episode where that happened. And
the best part about the CSI episode is they'll have solved the entire thing by using a piece of equipment that I've used that does not work in 3 minutes like they lie and tell you. Okay? Yeah. It's a 2-hour fucking job. And they do it in 3 minutes. Oh, the LCM SMS says this. No, it fucking doesn't. Shut up.
In a white suit.
In a white
very
suit.
Beautiful.
With sunglasses.
That's like women who go into the hospital, obviously to give birth, and it's like in TV time, it's like, quick, it's gonna happen straight away. And then real life, it's like a day or two later, and you're like, why is it not here yet?
9 hours later.
Yeah.
I've just spent £100 on car parking. What's going on?
Reality. Day 3 in the maternity ward.
Everything should be voiced over by the bloke from Big Brother.
That's it.
Speaking of CSI, I was listening to Joe Rogan the other day, and they were talking about Ice-T.
Oh yeah,
and they were saying that apparently he's the longest running male character on American television.
Yes,
and he's playing a cop.
Yes,
and this is the guy that
amazing.
wrote this is the guy that wrote Cop Killer.
Yeah.
And then he also the song "Fuck the Police" as well.
In what series is this that he was?
I think he's in
CSI.
He's in CSI.
He's in
NCIS.
Okay.
No, he's not NCIS. He's CSI Miami or something. Or it's
not
one
CSI
of the
Miami,
CSI
spin-offs. That's the ginger bloke with the glasses, and he always
definitely come full circle there, hasn't he? For considering his earlier output.
Oh, there you go. Canadian Jim says it's Law and Order. No, it's not Law and Order, is it? No, it can't. I'm going to Google that shit. You guys carry on.
Anyway,
Anyway,
fair enough.
Martin, tell us a bit about yourself so I can shut up and find out where he was.
Do some Googling. So fun enough, everyone calls me Hod, pretty much. That's pretty much what everyone knows me as. If anyone calls me Martin, it usually means I'm in trouble. So that's usually the way it goes. Obviously comes from the second name. So a little bit about me. So I live in North Hampshire, hence the reason why I was lucky enough to be able to drop my beers off direct to the doorstep on my way to work. My background is I'm a chemical and process engineer by trade, actually. Have been for the last 25 years. I've specialized in kind of automation, process control, instrumentation, bit of chemical engineering. I'm an actual kind of, like I say, electrician by trade originally, but kind of turned my hand to process control.
Yep.
Ironically, weirdly, I actually got into brewing probably when I was about 16, 17, back in the 90s. Yes, I am that old. In the original cask beer boom. So back before Small Brewers Relief was a thing, there was a brief kind of boom for about 4 or 5 years that went on in the 90s. And I actually worked for a small microbrewery. There was a guy that owned a pub, or he actually owned sort of 3 or 4 pubs. I think he was a chemical engineer himself, and he thought, actually, do you know what? I can make beer. So I managed to get a job washing casks outside in the freezing cold rain, digging out mash tuns. I've got vivid memories of climbing into boil kettles and scrubbing the inside with wire wool, because it was a big gas-fired one and with walls like this thick. So after they transferred out, it was still pretty hot. So you're basically in there scrubbing and baking yourself along the way.
Melting your feet.
Open, yeah, exactly. Open top fermenters, not particularly big, sort of, I don't know, probably about 5 hec, something like that, sort of 500,
5
litres, 5 hec, so not massive. Lifting kind of, 18 gallon firkins and the like. And yeah, I kind of got into that and learned a bit about brewing. But then lucky enough, I managed to get into an apprenticeship and got a job and did all that stuff and discovered, women, good times and all that stuff, as you do. Yeah, exactly. And then weirdly, and I blame my wife for all of this, it's her fault we got into this mess. Because let's be honest, brewing is it's a hobby that just gets out of hand way too quickly.
Totally.
I think anyone who's got into brewing, you start out going, I'm just going to do this, save a few quid.
Did she buy you a kit?
We can all attest to this.
She did.
My wife did the exact same. Exact same. She bought me a kit and she regrets
a day she's regretted forever.
For the rest of her life. So yeah, she bought me a kit, and it was one of those kind of Christmas present, birthday present things where someone at work, she was like looking for ideas. They're like, "Oh, buy one of these kits. It's it's everything. It's in there. It's all right. It's quite a laugh."
What one was it?
I've got a horrible feeling it was either a Wherry or an Admiral kit.
Oh, right, one of those.
Absolute classic brown tosh. It was pretty awful. But being an engineer, being a geek, being a process engineer, I was like, I think I could do better. So I then bought another kit and then another kit, and I was like, they could definitely do better with this. So then played around with a bit of partial mash like you do, and it's like a really bad addiction. And next thing I know, I've got a Braumeister, a couple of fermentation fridges, 4 tap kegs. I've got an entire extended family of corny kegs now, with probably 10 or 12. My own bottle store, and it just kind of grows out of hand.
Not to mention 4 CO2 canisters.
Yeah, quite a few CO2 canisters.
Just 4. No worries.
But I mean, so this kind of leads onto the comp thing and stuff. Everything I do is closed transfer. So I ferment in a fermentosaurus. Everything's in there. I CO2 flush everything. Every time I fill I do kegging. For example, I strip every keg down after use, strip it down completely. Yeah. Clean it, sterilize it. And then when I go to fill them, I've got 2 kegs that I keep full of sterilant, and I empty that into the kegs I'm going to fill, and then I push that keg out with CO2 into the next keg, which then pushes any oxygen out. So I've then got a completely O2 free keg. Do that for the 2, and then when I do the transfer, I do a closed transfer from my Fermentosaurus straight into the keg. I'm quite.
That's why you need. That's why you've got 4 CO2 canisters behind you.
Yeah. But the way I look at it is, you know, okay, CO2's like doubled in price, right? Let's not beat around the bush. It's doubled in price, but it's still
used
35
to be
quid.
Yeah.
It's like 18 quid. It's like 35 now.
Yeah.
My
Cheap
view
insurance.
Well, but then also I look on it, if I've spent 40 quid and 2 weeks on a batch of like 29 litres of beer, the least I can do is give it the attention it deserves and use a quid's worth of CO2.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
some of the homebrew guys I kind of on some of the forums and stuff like that, they cut those little corners, and it's those little corners and it's those little bits of your process that can make a big difference in the quality in your beer at the end. It's like people, like, for example, like yeast, for example, if I use a lot of dry yeast, but if I do, I'll generally always use 2 packs because 1 pack is probably just enough. And I've done some yeast counts, and I've got my microscope out and done some cell counts, and it's probably just enough. But you know what?
I love this guy.
You can. Oh yeah, no, I've got a whole lab. I've got my microscope, so I methylene blue. I've got my hemocytometer. I've got my clicker, and I do my cell counts just to make sure. And we'll talk about that in the comp beer, because I've learnt with verdant yeast that actually it gets to its best at about generation 3, generation 4. So if you're using the verdant dry yeast, personally, I find I get 1 pack because I'm a bit tight, right? Because that's quite expensive. So I grow that in a starter. So I grow it up to a pitchable amount that I know I need for the 28, 29 litres I do. So I've got the minimum cell count I need. I'll then pitch it, and then I'll then harvest the yeast back off of it. I've got a process where I drop all the yeast out before I dry hop, seal it, take all the clean yeast out. I then do a little acid wash with it, put it to one side, do the cell count on it, pitch it again. And I've found over time, generation 3, generation 4 is when that dry yeast is at its best, and you get the most kind of stone fruit flavors and aromas out of it.
It's kind of interesting because I think verdant just constantly recycle it, don't you? At least that's kind of how they ended up with that.
Well,
almost variant, right?
Well, they ended up with it because I think they'd got like
London Ale 3,
and they've been repitching it and repitching it and repitching it.
Yeah.
And then after a while, they're like, there's something in this that isn't in, that's not in straight up London Ale 3. And they sent it off to a yeast lab, and they're like, yeah, actually, there's this strain within it. And they then isolated that and then grew it up. My understanding is, to a point, they still have that yeast in a bank, and they'll get to a point where they're like, actually, we need a fresh batch come in, and then they'll restart, because obviously they've got yeast growing tanks, and the amount of beer they're doing now is bonkers. But that's just what I found at a homebrew level. I warned you I'd geeked out on this, right? So
brilliant.
Yeah, I think if you have a lab, right, that for me is kind of like, that's the final bastion of homebrew nerdery.
No, I thought I was like yeast geek supreme with like slants and all of that stuff, but no.
I've not gone as far as slants.
No, but the yeast lab is kind of the step above that. So I think you skipped slants and gone straight to
I thought ultimate was that if you had a cool ship and you were harvesting your own yeast.
Maybe that's
right. You know what though? I've been considering. I've been thinking about, is there a way I could do some kind of wild inoculation, because I'm dying to try it.
Yeah,
of course there is, right? It's even if you just made up a yeast starter, didn't pitch any yeast in it, and just put it outside. Yeah. You'd end up with effectively the same thing. Which
if you've got any fruit trees in the garden, just stick like a yeast starter underneath that with some sort of like muslin cloth
Yeah.
over the top of it or something. I think that's the way a lot of people go about collecting sort of wild yeast. And yeah, I'm sort of on the same thing where I'm really tempted to give it a go soon, but I feel like obviously you're getting to the end of the season when you're probably going to be able to collect stuff. So it's
Exactly.
sort of now or never, I think, for this year, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, and I don't know what the rest of you guys are like, but I kind of plan ahead what I'm going to make and what I want to make and stuff like that, and I kind of don't have space in the brew schedule in time, if you know what I mean. Like next beer for me is a Hefeweizen. That's the next beer I'm making after the one I've got fermenting just there at the moment.
Yep.
Can I just ask a couple of questions?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah, it's fine.
Martin, where did you study?
Where did I study? So weirdly, I didn't go to university. I went through an apprenticeship, self-taught. I did college.
Mm-hmm.
We won't get into the boring stuff of it, but I was kind of living on my own from about the age of 16. So, and I was really lucky. I had a guy in this shared house I was living with, and he used to work for an aerospace company as an engineer. He used to bring work home with him, and this is back in the day when used to smoke a bit of the funny stuff, and we'd sit around the table in the evening. I'd be like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "Oh, well, this is a gyro, and this is what I'm doing with this," and just kind of talk. And I'd be like, "Oh, this is really quite interesting." He was like, "What you need to do is you need to go to college and go and do an ONC, I think it was, in mechatronics." And he's like, "Go and do that," and that kind of set me off on the path. And I went through college, and then I was really lucky at the age of like 19, so I was quite old in comparison. And I was given a chance by a guy to have an apprenticeship. And strictly speaking, I shouldn't have got the job. I was like 19, everyone else was like 16, all that sort of stuff. But I was given an opportunity, and I kind of went at it from there. So yeah, I'm entirely self-taught. I've got no academic background to back it up.
The only reason I ask is because the area where you're from, Southampton, I went to university in Surrey, and we used to get a lot of people from the south coast coming up to Surrey because it was just far enough that you couldn't live at home, but close enough so that if you got into the
washing done at the weekend.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you went to Surrey the same as me. That's all. Because my uncle was the head of chemical and bioprocess engineering there.
Well, I think Hoddy's North Hampshire, so he's not quite Southampton, but yeah.
Yeah, so actually, I'm surprised my accent, it kind of comes and goes. So I'm actually from the West Country originally. So I'm from a town called Frome, sort of just south of Bath, south of Bristol.
Great,
my family's from Cornwall originally. Yeah, there you go. So I grew up in Frome, and then like most of us, I met a lady that just so happens to be from she was living in London at the time. And what do us blokes do? We move to wherever your other half is.
Everybody follows the pussy. Everybody follows the pussy.
I make no bad.
I wouldn't have been in Bedford for any other reason.
No, Tommy, you'd have still been in Huddersfield.
Well, no, that's not where I'm from. But anyway.
Yeah. So, okay. Interesting. I gotta say, quite interesting. Congratulations on winning the competition, Martin. I think you did a banging job with a great beer. I'll be honest with you. So why don't you break that beer down for people and just let us know what you did and why you did it?
Okay. So first thing I'll say, right, is so I'm really lucky. I'm in there's a homebrew forum I belong to, the Homebrew Forum, which I think most people know about. Been involved with that for many years, and over time there's been a couple of 3 guys that we've kind of found that we're all a bit like-minded. So we have a WhatsApp group, and there's 4 of us, brewing banter. We send beers to each other and stuff like that on a very regular. So beer mail, a bit like you guys. We're really good at kind of sharing ideas, processes, critiquing our own beer, taking the piss out of each other, all the usual sort of stuff. So we kind of do all that. And one of the guys said, "Oh, there's a competition coming up," and they've entered a few competitions. There's a competition coming up down at Unity, with you guys, Hop Addition. But it's a little bit unusual in the sense that it's not a to style competition. because most competitions are, make a style and you get judged on it being a style. And it's like, these are the parameters, but, best beer wins. And I nearly didn't enter, and I didn't honestly think I would kind of come anywhere. So actually, out of all the beers I've entered in a few competitions here and there, winning this one and being judged purely on being a great beer probably means more to me than winning a comp for making the closest style of a Cascadian dark ale from at the out, somewhere in Germany. Do you know what I mean? I think that, and particularly because I know Jimmy a bit, knowing how critical, I use the word critical, but in a good way, and how good he is at being able to detect a good and a bad beer and faults and flaws. I think having my beer come out on top means more to me. So I'll say thank you to you guys for that, and Jimmy and all the guys involved, because my beer to come out on top of that just blew me away. Absolutely blew me away. So yeah, no, fair play to you all. Fair play. I think that's a great thing. I think brewing to style, but making a great beer from your own recipe, that is a lot harder. So there is that. So anyway, the beer. I mean, it's just when you messaged me, I was literally just stood with some friends in the kitchen, and my phone went off, and I saw something on my watch. I was like, "What was that?" Got it out, and I was like, "You never guess what's happened."
When you drinking the beer with your friends?
I was actually drinking the beer at the time. Yes.
That's what it's all about.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, honestly, genuinely and and when you read the results out, and hearing someone in the industry that is well known for being really on top for process and quality and stuff like that, and to say that he thought my beer was a superb beer, I thought was just you couldn't ask for anything more than that. I think
it was well deserved, mate. It was really well deserved.
Definitely.
It was definitely well deserved.
And I think that sort of top three was pretty closely fought. There were some really good beers in that top 3 or 4, but yours came out just ahead, and it was, Jimmy really liked it, and I think you're right. Jimmy's got an amazing palate, and I think actually you were in the category that Jimmy was
the fuck me
was it was me, Andy, Jimmy, and Robbie from Yakima Chief.
Yeah,
and so sort of past that test was I remember really hard fought, I think.
Yeah, I think you're in the most hotly contested category anyway, as far as the sort of judging went. And then, like you say, Jimmy was, I don't want to use the word ruthless, but like honest and accurate.
He could pick out all sorts of flaws in any of them.
And there was beers that we sort of let through off of our table. We kind of knew they weren't quite there, but we sort of, either somebody sort of still liked it or thought that it was decent enough. And when you saw sort of Jimmy in particular try those beers and just instantly go, this is what's wrong with it. No, yeah, and then you okay, it is that, yeah. So yeah, there was definitely a level of judging there in the competition, where you've got the professionals involved, where it was like, okay, yeah, so there weren't going to be dodgy beers getting through to the top 3 or 4.
Well, and if you think about it, and I'll go on about beer in a second, but if you think about it, in that commercial space, you've got to make beers that people want to drink and they're happy to pay for. It's all well and good making homebrew at home. You're making a homebrew at home, and you give your homebrew to your mates that come round, and of course they're going to say it's lovely because it's free alcohol. What's not to love about free alcohol? But the difference is you've got to be prepared to pay for it, and got to be prepared to come back, and that's the whole commercial element. You've got
to be very careful about feedback that you get from friends and family, I find.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Hod, do you remember what entry number you were?
Oh God, let me have a look. Quick look. I
want to say 68, but I don't think it was.
49.
TA.
Only that I've got the feedback. I've got the feedback sheets right in front of me, so we can talk a bit about what the feedback was.
It would have come. I think who sent the feedback sheets out? Was it you, Owen?
It was me. Yeah.
There we go. Hang on a second. Feedback sheets, and then just while you're finding that, I'll do. So I was entry number 37.
Oh, annoyingly, that's just the one feedback sheet I couldn't find. Typical. I have 4 out of 5. 37.
Not slow.
Do you want me to resend it to you?
Typical.
There you
go. So the beer, actually, I kind of designed from scratch. Again, I think a lot of people fall into this trap. It's quite a simple grist. There's not lots in it, and I think some people fall into that trap of, some of this, and then some of that, and then some of this, and some of that, and just kind of throwing loads of stuff at it, and you lose that kind of clarity. 58% extra pale Marisotto. Then we've got 25% Golden Promise.
Oh, I'm extra.
So just to add a bit of kind of character, just to make it a little bit more grainy, give it a little bit more kind of texture and flavour with a little bit of Golden Promise.
Sweetness.
And then 8% of Carapils, just to aid with a little bit of head retention. Yep. Nothing more, not to add it, give it any colour or any flavour, just to give it a bit of head retention. And then another 8% of malted wheat flakes. Again, just to add to that body. There's no loads of oats in it. So just that little bit of 8% of wheat flakes. Again, what I've played around with a lot over time is water chemistry versus grist. And I think there's always that balance to be had between the two, because I think I heard you guys mention it the other day about with beers, particularly when you're trying to make those kind of hazy beers, it's really easy to tip it over the edge and it becomes a bit flabby.
Yeah.
Just becomes too much.
Yeah.
So there's that side. The water where I live is actually not that bad. I remember listening to the podcast you guys did with Jimmy, and you know he's had to kind of come to peace with his water. He's kind of fought with it for many years, and then that's right. Yeah, and so my calcium levels are not too bad, pretty low. So I can actually play around with stuff. I don't have to add bottled water. I don't have to do RO.
Yeah.
So actually using just a bit of calcium chloride, bit of gypsum, and then salt as well. So use the sodium as well. I don't add sodium to the mash like a lot of people do, because I found that you lose the sodium in the mashing process. So you lose the benefit of the salt. So actually I add my kind of mash sodium after I've sparged. I then add it straight to it. And then I've also then got all the other additions in the base water anyway. So I've got an extra sort of bit of sodium addition that I do post mash, kind of just as I've sparged. I still kind of correct the sparge water and stuff like that.
Do you think that fixes the flabbiness then?
It doesn't fix the flabbiness, but what it does, it means you can soften the beer up without it going flabby. Because I find if you add more calcium chloride, you're pushing that calcium up, and that then makes it become a bit chalky, and it goes a bit flabby.
That's where it goes, yeah.
Exactly. Whereas I find adding the sodium, giving all the secrets away here, adding the sodium post sparge and just playing around with that, you can actually control the softness of the beer a lot more, and you get less buffering effect as well. So your pH doesn't go crazy as well as you move through the various stages.
Yeah.
So that's
fucking scientist says buffering effect. Fuck you all with your alkalinity bollocks. Fuck you all.
Chris really likes it when people say buffering, as you just realised.
Well, that's what it is. It's not fucking alkalinity, it's a buffering effect.
Chris Bingo.
Pushing back the foreskin, yes. Go
on. So that's kind of that side. So I've played around with water a lot, and I know a lot of people are afraid of water chemistry.
Yeah.
I use Beersmith you know, I'll be honest, I don't do, you know, all the manual calculations. I use Beersmith because, you know, you listen to any podcast from Brad Smith, you know, that guy's a proper clever dude, right? You know, the calculations, admittedly, Beersmith 3 is better than 2. So the calculations there are pretty good.
Yeah, it changed, didn't it? The water, they added in water in V3, didn't they?
Exactly, yeah, that's right. So that made a really big difference. I get my water tested, not all the time, because the industry I work in, I actually know some of the people in the local water company, so I know when the water's changing or where the sources are different. So I used to work in the water industry.
Text goes here just so you know.
It's time to brew a stout.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, wait,
quick, pale ales now, quick.
Lads, who's text Hoddy? Because we just changed the water source. It's on their checklist.
Yeah, that's right.
Text Hoddy.
And then, so getting into hops and stuff, and this I find is really funny, and I'm planning to pop into Unity to go and see Jimmy because I think I need to tell him this. So, the podcast you guys did with him prior to the comp, and I'd already designed the beer, and I'd actually made a version. Was it before this one? No, actually, no, I've made a version after this. But so this beer, probably, well, in the Whirlpool and in the dry hop, is quite a lot of Azaka. Now, what's the hop that Jimmy said he absolutely fucking hates?
He's gone off it completely to the point
completely
of
gone off it completely. That's right. Had it and everything.
Conflux.
Yeah, exactly. And he's played around Conflux a lot. It's quite funny. You look at the history of Conflux. If you ask Jimmy what the history of the hops in Conflux are, and it's interesting how it's moved around. It was Idaho 7 before that, or no, it was Idaho 7, then it was Azaka, but before that it was just sort of Citra, and how it's kind of moved through, and how the brewers kind of taste changes, if you know what I mean. But I'd already made the beer, and I remember listening to that podcast, thinking, right, wow, my beer.
That's me stuff.
That's done.
That's me screwed. Wow. I'm not paying postage. Fuck it. I'll just hand them in anyway to Owen. It'll be fine. and then for it to come out like it did, I think it was A, brilliant, but B, hilarious. So I need to tell Jimmy this.
Yeah. So, do you know how much Azaka was in that beer? You know that hop you really hate. Yeah. Oh, bless him.
So I know it's again talked about, but in a lot of the beers I do, unless it's a specific beer that calls for it, like a really bitter West Coast or a stout that needs a load of bittering, I generally don't add any bittering hops during the boil at all. Everything I do is all in the Whirlpool.
Always? No.
So I just vary the temperature of the Whirlpool or the amount of hops and the amount of time that they're in there. And that's generally what I do. And I do that for a lot of the hoppy beers that I do. I do it for some of the West Coast. I brewed a West Coast on the weekend. I did put some hops in it, 30 minutes to really drive the bitterness up. But there was still 40 minutes, 80 degrees with kind of, 70, 80 grams in a kind of 28, 29 litre batch.
So are we talking just sort of like pale ales and, sort of more like down that IPA sort of route, or is this like across the board for pretty much all styles that you would do that?
Not all the styles, no. I mean, so Saison, for example, don't need to do it, right? I mean, that is just usually actually I tried to do an addition at 60. Sure. But all the hoppy beers and stuff like that, I mean, it's all pretty much in the Whirlpool. I know. I mean,
it sounds very similar to what the from Track that we had on was saying. That's pretty much their sort of approach to all theirs. It was virtually none of their beers have anything pre-Whirlpool, and that's just how they approach it. So
I think
you're in good company.
So, question, I'd say, clearly, like you're interested in some styles where you want IBUs. That's why you're kind of pushing the Whirlpool temperature up. But is there another reason why you do that rather than add it in the boil?
I found, so there's a couple of sides to this. I found that I retain more aroma for the hops going through the rest of the process because you're not boiling them off, and but then also that's partly come through a lot of the training and learning I've done actually. So I've kind of worked a bit and volunteered a bit in commercial breweries. So hence the reason, you know, you say about the guys at track and you speak to Jimmy and he'll say the same thing, predominantly everything that goes in the whirlpool. Because that I think is, to me, is more predictable than just trying to add them in at the right time, at the right, you know, amounts all the way through. And I find it just gives me better results in, you know, particularly with this beer for the comp. It's all about the aroma, right? You need that aroma, you need that flavour in the beer.
Yeah, I was just interested as to whether maybe you found that the bitterness is more rounded, almost a bit like when you do first wort hopping.
Yeah.
And in reality, what you're doing is kind of putting the hops in at a lower temperature and allowing that temperature to come up.
Do you know what I think? When you say it, I think it's probably a softer bitterness, right?
Yeah.
You know, when you boil stuff hard, you're going to drive. You're going to isomerize those alpha acids a lot harder, aren't you? If you're boiling it hard versus, you know, just doing that kind of hop stand or that whirlpool. Actually, the one qualification I have done is I have done my IBD, so I've done my Institute of Brewing and Distilling diploma and stuff as well, and that's you do quite a bit of the kind of chemistry around isomerization, alpha acids, beta acids, and all that sort of stuff, and everything that goes on there. And you know, to a point, brewers are creatures of habit, right? We've kind of got the way we like to do stuff, and we just kind of do it that way. And for me, it's all about the processes, right? It's your SOPs all the way through. Get those right and tweak them and stick to them can make a really big difference to the quality of beer you make along the way. I was always, in the early days of brewing at home, I don't know about anyone else, I was a bugger for at the last minute go, oh, I'll just change this just at the last minute for no good reason. Oh, I'll just put some more hops in, or I'll just change this. Or...
I think we were literally talking about that on the last pod, actually. And
yeah, how familiar does that
we
sound?
We know that you shouldn't, but you still find yourself doing it from time to time.
You do. It's like it...
Hang on a minute, I've just found a bag end of like this random hop over here.
Yeah, it's not even got a label on it.
Yeah, exactly. I have no idea what it is, but
smells good.
What could possibly go wrong?
I think the phrase "curiosity killed the cat" kind of comes to mind, right? And for our listeners who might not be familiar with the terminology, SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedure. So just your process, basically. Your kind of defined, designed process. You know, and I think without a standard, you can't really improve. There isn't a basis for improvement, so you can't improve on random.
This is it, and that's the one thing I'm really critical about the beers I make, and I want to get better, and I want my beers to be better. So every time I've got the folder back here. I keep every single brew sheet I make. So Beersmith, and I've got all my notes on it, and I've kept every single one ever since I've started all grain brewing, and I go back to the notes. And I take, pH samples and, gravity samples all the way through and stuff like that, because I want to be able to look at it and go, when I drink a beer afterwards, I go, right, what's good? What could be better? And then take that forward to the next one.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the difference between a chemical and bioprocess engineer and all of you fuckers. Right? And there is a certain level of anal retention that goes in with being an analyst and a chemist and somebody who's responsible for controlling process, as opposed to Steve, who's decided he's going to pimp his Werry kit. Okay? Now, just on the subject of questions, because I've got this fantastic thing that allows me to click on people's messages and it's pop up on the screen. Ron Muir, our latest Patreon. Thanks, Ron, yet again. Also,
hey, Ron.
Is that a Discovery Sport or is that an Evoke? Because if it's an Evoke, we're going to have problems. But he wants to know, where did you get your water tested? Was it at Murphy's?
Yes, it was.
There you go. That's
so I think the first time I got my water tested, it was through who are the guys over in Salisbury, the homebrew people? Oh God, it's falling out my head.
Homebrew UK? No.
No, not Homebrew UK.
The Homebrew Shop.
Was it the Homebrew Shop?
No, not the Homebrew Shop in Farnborough. They're just up the road from me. They're not too far away from where I live. No.
Hashtag Yakima Chief.
Yes, that's right. No,
yeah.
they've the guy that owns it also started Dark Farm Brewing.
Oh yeah,
The UK.
Brew UK. There you go.
Brew
Yeah.
UK.
So the first time I got my water test, it was through Brew UK because they were doing basically a pass through at no charge. I think actually straight through to Murphy's. But then I made contact with Murphy's and just did the water test through them. What I would recommend you do though, because you don't have to get your water tested all the time, because generally the sort of base minerals will stay pretty constant. Usually most people that through reservoir systems that you're supplied from, it's a general blend of water. What I do though is I test my you'll have to correct me, my HCO3. So I
The hardness.
I check my hardness probably every couple of weeks, because that's the thing that will make the difference to your beer. And that's to do with the source of the water as it comes through.
As temporary hardness. Is that correct, Chris? Or Hoddy? Yeah.
Yes, it is temporary.
Oh yes, thank you.
Yeah,
just chalking up the ticks there from the
good
teacher.
pun. Good pun.
I missed that completely. Ron Muir said it's a Disco 5.
But it's just good to know, because it's a really simple test. You can buy them on like Amazon for people that have like tropical fish tanks.
Yeah, Salifert, is it the company that does those?
Test kit. That's it. Yeah, and you just do the titration test on it, at which it buffers and changes over, and then you just read it off.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that the other minerals generally stays fairly constant, because you do see a lot of people sort of saying on forums and stuff, oh yeah, you can get the water report, but don't rely on that because it's going to change all the time. It's going to be really different and stuff. But like the water reports that I've gotten, Anglian Water actually provide a really detailed, full breakdown of literally everything, which they're really good for that. And you can see the number of tests they've done and the averages and the maximum and the minimum and stuff. And there's not a lot of change over like the sort of 5 or 6 years that I've actually been looking at those. So I've always thought, well, the sort of margin of error is only going to be sort of 10 to 20 ppm at the most, based on the figures that they're giving us. So
that's right.
Yeah, I've never been concerned about that changing a lot.
In the grand scheme of things, it's nothing.
Yeah, and how the pH levels have come out based on that, it always seems like it must be fairly accurate, because it seems to be matching up with what the calculators are showing all the time for me.
Pretty much, your water supply in most people's area will generally stay very constant. There's not many places in the UK where you will get your water supply, or where your raw water comes from before treatment, where it'll be from an area where either its surface water or the groundwater is drastically different. Generally where you live, it'll either be, it'll be a lime loam sort of soil, and you'll be coming out of boreholes out of the water, and that'll be pretty constant, or it'll be out of surface water out of a big reservoir. And some of these massive reservoirs, right, you can chuck in as much water as you like, the variance is going to stay.
It ain't going to change.
Constant. No, that's right, exactly.
I mean, I've got to admit, I'm kind of surprised and a little bit confused that you obviously have access to a laboratory, and you haven't nicked a burette and some pH indicator and do your own titrations. To be fair,
I haven't quite gone that far. I've kind of cobbled together my own sort of little mini lab, I think is probably the best way to put it, and I'm kind of building it up. It's funny actually. I've been poring over Anton Parr's website recently, and I've been trying to decide between an Easy Dens and the new digital refractometer that they've just brought out.
I wouldn't bother with either.
Well, do you know what? Actually, the digital refractometer, from a brewing perspective, actually, I think is probably more valuable, because it has temperature correction in it. It's good, obviously, for for Plato, for sugar content, which actually that's where you need to know, definitely through your brew day, that's where you need to know where your readings are. Either at the beginning of mash, mid mash, end of mash, and then sparge, and then end of boil, because then you can do your liquor back calculations and stuff. Once within reason, once the yeast is chewed through whatever's there, you've got what you've got, right?
Yep.
You can use a hydrometer, degas it. You've got what you've got. There's nothing you can do to change it. before fermentation, you can do something about that.
Brewers
And
make
let's be
work.
honest,
Yeast make
yeah,
beer.
everyone loves an analytical instrument. Let's be honest.
I don't know, and Andy likes to have olive oil to his beers, so or like dry hop with Cascade and get some hop creep.
Yeah,
steal a few extra points,
Didn't I disprove the whole olive oil theory?
I'm just jesting. Going back to the water thing, I get a pretty decent water report from my local water company, but when you read through, like, what is an incredibly detailed number of different compounds and chemicals and things in the water, it's quite frightening. You're like, it turns out there's actually plutonium in the water and lead. The lead.
How's the arsenic getting on currently?
You're like
helium and all this sort of stuff. And you're like,
what is in the water I'm drinking? This is insane. So yeah, it's but on a more serious note, I'd encourage our listeners to investigate your local water reporting, because I think actually it can save you quite a bit of money, and as we talked about, it's quite consistent. So just go and check it out. You can Google it. It might take you half an hour, but you can normally find a really good report that helps you out.
Yeah, then you'll find most commercial breweries as well will just take tap water. They tend to not use RO, or they might use a simple kind of charcoal filter or something, but yeah.
That's it. I mean, commercial brews, it's like, they're probably paying for their water, right? Obviously, because everyone pays for the water, but using enormous amounts of water, to be using an industrial size RO would be an incredible expense, I'd have thought.
Just relocate.
Interesting you should say that. Funny story about the new Charles Wells, which is now Brew Point Brewery in Bedford. I went to do the tour there, and they made a big thing about how they'd sort of sunk their own borehole, and they're using local water that they've sort of tapped themselves straight out the ground. And then halfway through the tour, they show us the massive RO room where they just run it straight into there and filter everything out. I was just like, hang on a minute.
What's the point?
Yeah.
But I guess the borehole, really, maybe it's more of a cost saving thing. Just
cheaper,
so they're not
paying for the water. So they can do
that was it. But
they
were doing the whole shtick about local water, blah 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 blah. It's like, and then we just strip everything out of it. So,
basically return it to just like completely chemically clean water.
Exactly.
So I did find that quite funny.
Gary Hughes.
Nobody else on the tour seemed to understand while I was giggling away at that point. But,
there's a certain
homebrew geekdom kicks in.
A certain level of nerdery that comes with chuckling about someone's RO story. Gary Hughes was saying that he's had his water tested both by Murphy's and Phoenix Analytical. He was saying that in his opinion, Phoenix were more accurate. Based on his experience of then brewing with those numbers. So maybe one for people to research if you're interested in getting your water tested, if your water report is not going to give you what you're after.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I found out, I think if you go through Murphy's, I don't like using AMS or CRS because it doesn't give you the flexibility, but they will give you kind of, if you want to make this type of beer, you need to be looking at adding this amount by volume. So they will give you guidelines. So if you're new to it and you're a bit frightened about what you're doing, actually just getting that water report, just following that is going to give you a really good starting point, and then you can just play with it from there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Hoddy. I think it's a bit broad brush though, isn't it? But
it is.
You're quite right. For starting out in water chemistry, it's a good starting point.
Yeah, exactly. Because some people can get properly freaked out by it, right? So,
seem to, yeah.
If you have appropriate chemistry knowledge, would it not? Have I gone really quiet or something? No, I haven't. Right.
No, you're good.
If you have appropriate chemistry knowledge, surely you could, rather than using AMS and CRS, which adds a lot of different things into 100%. Your water profile straight away. Yeah. If you just were to keep a dilute solution of maybe, I don't know, some hydrochloric, some sulfuric, maybe a bit of phosphoric, you could end up with quite, if you knew what you were doing and you run the maths, you could end up with quite a steady slate to start off with anyway. Because you're going to rid yourself of the bicarb. That's going to get dropped to the bottom. You're going to rid yourself. You're going to either increase your chloride levels or your sulfate levels, which, depending on the beer you want to do, would be appropriate. My only caveat that I would say with this is 99.9% of people in this country I wouldn't trust with nail varnish remover, never mind really good acids. Okay? So I think that's where CRS and AMS come into it for most people, or spend 50 quid and buy a fucking RO, use the water to basically water your garden, because the plants aren't that bothered about the water. They're really bothered about the minerals that are in it, but they're not really, the water's going to be there from rain or whatever anyway. They really want the minerals to allow them to grow appropriately. So as long as you keep the outflow from your RO, you're on pretty much a winner anyway. But if you don't want to go down the route of wasting the water, let's say you're on a water meter or something, and you're Scottish and can't reach the bottom of your pockets,
then you've just got soft water on tap and it's RO.
Where you are, you have
whatever.
You just go like that, it just fills up. And I'm in.
Nobody likes you, Andy. So the bottom line is, no, I think he's
no one likes Chris.
Look at that hairline. I think that you could properly manage your water profile through treating your water to an effective level anyway, unless you're like me, in which case your hardness is above 580 at the minute.
Oof.
Yeah.
Ouch.
And it used to be gorgeous, mate. I could brew lagers with mine before. What? And then they built a fucking housing estate and sunk another hole.
Getting like the pure Pennine bloody water.
I don't want anything.
What's Yorkshire?
I don't want anything from the fucking Pennines. You can keep that shit. That's almost in Lancashire.
So you need RO?
I use RO, yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna have to, with that.
Yeah, that's right. Or I've got some of my mates. They just use bottled water from Tesco's, and they'll just buy bottled water and just do it that way. Ashbeck, yeah, that's right. Does the job. I mean, out of interest, it is a bit. It just doesn't. Something doesn't feel right about just tipping all of that into your brewing machine. I mean, I use phosphoric acid as for all my pH buffering. I found over time that actually the taste threshold is that much higher that you can use it that much more, and you're not adding as much calcium. I used to use citric acid actually in some beers because you could almost push it a little bit, and actually a little bit of citric in the beer wasn't too bad. But that's when I found actually using phosphoric, because it doesn't affect the other minerals in the beer. It keeps it nice and low.
It's the reason why they use it in Coca-Cola and not lactic, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're probably all phosphoric acid users, apart from Andy, who just has beautiful water straight out the tap.
No, I use lactic. I use lactic to adjust my pH. Yeah.
Lactic.
But he just has to wave it over the.
He sort of flips it like holy water.
No, it's not. It's not like that at all. You need probably about 6 mil, 5-6 mil of lactic to get you down.
For lactic, that's still a real small amount, though, isn't it? Compared to what
6 mil's a lot, especially when it's concentrated stuff. That's a lot.
Yeah, 8%.
Oh, is it 8? Oh, okay. If it's that strong, then that's still a fair bit. But
right, gents, I'm loving the chat. I'm loving the chemistry. I'm loving the geekiness. However, my glass is empty.
Is it commercial? Because I've pulled mine.
I was going to say I preempted that.
Commercial break.
Yeah, quick point, Tricky. Do you reckon we could return to our commercial break? The
theme tune,
the jingle tune. Yeah, we need to.
We just have to have that little into it. Okay, so it's time for the commercial break, guys, and then as long as you stop there.
Well, go on then, Tricky. You do it.
Well, guys, I guess it's time for the commercial break.
Let's do it.
Drum roll. This is where we all go silent, and Tricky's going to have to edit out the really long silences.
I'm doing
scrabbling around trying to find beers.
That's complicated, is that? Which one do I go for?
You should have the commercial beer lined up, ready to go, fellas.
I know.
Ready to go. Easy peasy.
Be a pro like me and Andy.
Chris kind of jumped us, right? Chris was like, "Oh no, my glass is empty."
The issue that I have, right, is I currently have a fridge full of Polly's beers. And I don't know which
Ooh,
one I
nice.
want to drink next.
Oh,
First world problems.
Tough life.
Yeah, right.
I'm
I mean,
thirsty and I've got all these beers and I don't know which one to drink.
Do I go for Little Petal or do I go for Moonwrecker?
Moonwrecker, obviously.
Okay.
Just for the name, it's got to be.
Yeah, like you can't go. Should I drink Little Petal or Moonwrecker to a bunch of half-cut men?
So this means you've got to put in like a set of metal teeth, right, and just smile.
Yeah, and bite some metal stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, shut up. Yeah, good choice. Good choice. Oh, dear.
Shall I go?
Go on,
Go on, Andy, if you're ready.
Since it's Unity time, it's obviously Okie Dokie from Unity,
Nice.
which is a hazy 6.4%.
Oh, I love that beer.
And it's so dank. It's like tropical dank is the best way, I think, to describe it, where you're just getting wafts of pineapple and mango and just tropical juice. And it's just like the mouth feels just nice and filling, but you've got this lovely sort of nice bitterness. It cleans. But it's just that soft sort of lovely. With it being a 6.4, it just feels so good, and I'm just quite happy chewing away at this, or right through it, sort of thing. It's lovely. I don't know.
Yeah.
What was your thoughts on it? Owen, you says you love it.
Yeah, I think I bought a couple of cans of it, 2 or 3 cans of it when I was down at Unity. The problem was during the competition, the week running up to the competition, I was having all the beers delivered to me at my house, and I had to keep dropping them down to the brewery, right? So I'd have to walk into the tap room, and then there'd be 3 massive fridges all glaring at me. And, and I got sucked in a couple of times. So I had a couple of cans of that, and really, really good. Just
very good.
Yeah,
it's a collab. It's a collab with Pressure Drop. Yeah,
yeah, it's just got great body, super smashable for 6.5%. Yeah, amazing beer, really good.
It. Just a wee bit of the background on it. It's Sabro in the hot side, and then it's got double dry hop as Citra, El Dorado, and Brew One. So, yeah, there you go.
I think I said to Jimmy when we were down there, like, I'd say probably at least the last 6 months, like Unity have just stepped it up. They've just stepped it up, and their beers are just consistently smashing out the park. In my experience, they're just really solid. Yeah. Rare that you get a bad beer out of Unity.
Yeah, exactly. This is my second order now. Second case of beer I've had from Unity, and both times I've just been blown away, like at all the different beers that I've had from them. So yeah. Nice. Tricky.
Nice.
I'll go then. So it's not a track beer.
I was talking then. I was fucking muted.
Yeah, I was going to say your lips were moving, but we didn't hear anything. So it's an Arbor beer, but it's a collab with Shiny Brewery. So I actually had this turn up in my first Bruiser box or Bruiser box.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, coincidentally, it had a Shiny Brewery collab, which I hadn't heard of at all until I managed to blag a free kit out of Brew Day to brew their version of Praise the Sun, which is a Shiny Brewery beer, which has come out very well, by the way. But yeah, Arbor, no, I like them. Shiny Brewery, I did order some of their beers to do a bit of research, obviously, before doing the brew and the video that's going to come along as well shortly. But a lot of their beers were good. I must say, this is a New England IPA brewed with Citra Galaxy, Idaho 7, and Nelson Sauvin hops.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
And it comes in a fucking proper pint can.
A beast.
Everyone's favourite thing about Arbor, I think.
A tall boy.
And yeah, I mean, based on the description of the hops or the list of hops on there, yeah, it delivers just nice, juicy, really soft, virtually no bitterness. Yeah, I'm not getting like any of those hops particularly standing out as the kind
You're
of
not
lead,
getting the whiny, no.
the lead thing, but it's just a nice, like, yeah, it's a nice medley of hops, I'd say. So just a general sort of juicy, tropical, nice soft fruity flavor. And yeah, very decent beer, I think. If you do see that anyway, I think that's worth picking up. So gets the thumbs up from me.
Boom.
Who's next?
Can I go next? Because I'm very respectful
Chris
of
is
the
nearly
fact
drunk.
the fact that Martin is a guest on our podcast, and I want to give him the opportunity. However, this is going to disappear if I don't drink it, if I don't talk about it, rather. So, yeah, it's bad. I mean, yeah. This is Moonwrecker by Polly's Brew Co., which is Chinook, Citra, Mosaic, and Simcoe. And we all know my love-hate affair with Simcoe. It's something I've been trying to cure this over the last few weeks. This is just the only way to describe this beer is a fruity little dank cannabis bomb.
Oh,
right. So it's fruity, and when you burp, because everybody burps when you've had beer, direct it out your nose, right? Because you just get all these fruit aromas. It's amazing. But it tastes like straight up dank weed. And at the same time as you're like drinking this dank weed.
Owen.
Yeah, you need to mute yourself there.
Yeah,
right?
mate.
That was loud, dude.
I apologise. I thought I was muted.
Yeah.
No, fully enjoying.
I thought Andy was miming giving someone a blowjob.
It was
I'm like, where the fuck is this podcast going?
Tricky will edit it out. It's fine.
But yeah, you're not going to edit it out now. We just talked about it. Sure.
Well, yeah, now we've talked about it. It's got to stay in, hasn't it? Because otherwise, that's more editing.
But the main thing that I get from this is I get that dank, resinous kind of piney note right at the start, and then it transforms into a medley of like tropical fruits with just lemon taking the forefront. It's really interesting, and it's only 5%, and it's the kind of beer that's making me want to just drink more and more. It's really, really pleasant, and I've been getting into my pale ales over the last few weeks. And
unusual.
This is one of those beers. I mean, I would happily put an order in and just buy 6 cans of that.
Yeah,
it's a very nice beer.
High praise.
I feel like, Chris, you've almost gone a kind of, if you can't beat them, join them. I feel like you've come over to the hazy side, the dark side.
No, I got abused by actually at the competition when we were doing the judging. Jimmy and Yakima Chief Boy took me to one side and basically said, "What's these rumors I hear about you not liking Simcoe?" And I went, I'm not the world's biggest fan of Simcoe. It tastes like cat piss. At which point Jimmy said, "Get out my fucking brewery."
Quite right, too. Quite right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's like one of his favourites. It's like the king of hops or whatever. I can't remember this.
The thing is, when you talk to most brewers, a lot of them will say Simcoe's like right up there. With
I love it.
It doesn't go down well with a lot of the guests either on the pod. To be fair,
it's funny.
I've had some bad experiences with Simcoe, and I think I'll be honest with you, having done my research, because I'm a scientist, I keep notes. The one thing that I would say is that Simcoe in the darker beer is where I seem to get that cat piss from.
Oh, that's it's weird that you say that, because I was about to say Simcoe in a dark beer is actually where it kind of does even more exciting things.
That's where I get the cat piss.
Level up. Level
like
up.
Black IPAs and stuff with Simcoe and can be fucking amazing. Like,
I don't think it's the really dark malts. I think it's like
crystals.
Yeah, I just don't.
Okay, right.
Maybe
level
for
up.
Me, for my palate, I just get it's just sulfurous cat piss. Whereas in the lighter beers like this, I don't really get any of that. I don't get any sulfurous notes at all.
Tropical.
And I'm getting a wave of blueberry right now after that burp that's making me want like blueberry pie. So yeah, this is fucking brilliant. And it's an experience for me to kind of go down this route of forcing myself to drink the pale ales with all of these hops in and kind of experience them within the flavor sphere that they're in, for want of a better term. So yeah, love it, buy it. It's a great beer.
That's really interesting that you got a beer like that, because I found usually with those kind of beers, you get hop burn at the end because there's literally had so much hops put into it, and it's just had so much go through it that you just get that hop burn afterwards. But that's great, the fact that you can get that level of hopping and that level of flavor and aroma come through and not get that burn, which is that's a sign of a good beer, right?
Polly's Brewery, mate. Give them a shout.
Mark of a brewery that know what they're doing, for sure.
Although I will say, just to kind of back Hoddy up on what he's saying, yesterday I had a beer whilst I was talking to Owen, and it was Plank Curls, a double dry hop pale, which is Citra, Idaho 7, Mosaic, and Talus, and I got quite a sharp hop burn at the end of that one. This one doesn't have it at all. It's very fruity right at the end.
I think, maybe that might be the Talus, because Talus can be quite an aggressive hop.
Yeah,
it's lovely. I love this beer. More.
Hoddy, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a beer from what I personally consider to be the best brewery in the UK, if I'm honest.
Arbor?
No.
Burning
Sky.
Nice.
Burning Sky. Mark Tranter, that man is a magician. And we talked about this a little bit before, right? So don't get me wrong, I love my hazies, my pals, IPAs, but I also love Belgian, probably more that kind of French border saisons. So yeah, saison houblon. This beer, to be fair, is more about the yeast and the malt and how it's brewed more than anything else. The hops aren't anything to speak of. Celia, and I can never get it right. Stristle Spout. Got to get the Stristle Sprout. But yeah, just malted barley, wheat, and spelt grain in it. It's not your classic kind of clear saison. It's not crystal clear.
But, pure hazy boy.
Yeah, but
you sure that's not a double IPA?
But it's crisp, it's dry, it's got that kind of really nice peppery kind of saison character. It's not like loads of banana and bubble gum, because it is that kind of French border kind of thing going on. Yeah, and it's just little background to support it.
So
wonderful,
just
wonderful.
To clarify, are we talking more Bière de Garde than we are saison?
I wouldn't say. Yeah, you could say. Yeah, you could say a little bit. I mean, funnily enough, I ordered a box from them a week or so ago. So obviously, I chose a selection and then a couple of 750ml bottles to lay down in there. So I buy a bottle of their anniversaire every year. Well, I usually buy a couple of bottles of some of the specials that they do earlier in the year. I picked up a saison which had been in oak on some berries, and I picked up the saison de pêche, so the peach saison. I've got that in a bottle that I've laid down.
Oh, I've had that. It's good.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to that one. I picked up the Green Gauge one as well. They'd had in a fooder on Green Gauges as well, again on their own kind of culture of yeast. So
that sounds good.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I like Green Gauges. They're an interesting fruit.
Exactly, and then that on a saison, I think it's just going to be mega.
I'd imagine. I'm not sure if I've drunk that one when I went down to these hills with Brett and Graham. we were just smashing Burning Sky saisons left, right, and centre. It was amazing. Just really getting into that.
Yeah, I wanted to get to these hills, but I just couldn't make it happen because it's not actually a bit like you, Owen. It's not that far for me. But yeah, I mean, I've got just so much respect for what they do, what Mark Tranter does at Burning Sky, and just the whole ethos about how they work. And you know, they're not trying to be the biggest brewery in the world. It's just all about the beer and the quality and turning out everything that they do. They've turned their hands to some kind of hazy hoppy beers. Arise is one of them, and then Indecision Time and a few of those. And as you'd expect, they're absolute bangers as well. But just the quality they work to is amazing for me. So yeah, that's what I'm drinking as well. Love it.
Yeah, just while you're in there, Martin, are you close with Mark? Do you know him well enough?
No, I would give my right arm to brew with the guy. I think it's probably
that's a shame because he sounds like somebody we need to have on the podcast.
Totally fishing for a guest there.
I say this because I've had one Burning Sky beer in my life, and it was amazing. I had it at the Leeds Craft Beer Festival, whenever that was on, like 3 years ago or whatever. And I remember the clarity of flavour being right up there with, and I had a Nelson and Earl Grey beer from the Yeasty Boys. Yeah. And it was the clarity of
Matanana or something it's called.
Yeah, that's the one. And the clarity of flavour, being able to pick everything out of that beer was right up there with the Yeasty Boys beer. And those two stick in my mind for pure clarity, not of colour, but of flavour. And I would love to have him on. And I would love to be able to pick his brains as to, you know, the way that his brewing process works.
Yeah, I mean, I've read loads of interviews with him. He's a pretty special, clever guy, right?
Yeah. We need to get him on. Owen, make it happen.
I'll work my network and I'll see what I can do. But
so I'm pretty sure, isn't the head brewer one of the guys that started Beak? Didn't he train under Mark Tranter at Burning Sky? I'm pretty sure.
The fucking web gets more and more complex.
Oh, I mean, if you look at the family tree of brewers and where they've come from and who they've trained under and all this sort of stuff, it's, you know, you can trace the lineage, right? I mean,
the family tree.
Well, I mean, you know, but it's all about your mates and stuff as well. So you look at like Jimmy, for example, best mates with Bates at Duration, and they're also best mates with the head brewer at Boxcar. Yeah. And those three guys are, you know, best mates. Well, there's a really good reason.
Get all three of them on at a wanna. I imagine there's some bitching stories.
Oh, I mean, I listened. I was on holiday not so long ago, and I listened back to the podcast. I think you guys did with Duration. I think it was.
Yeah.
And the one thing that genuinely made me laugh out loud was when you were talking about drinking with Bates and how many beers. And it's when he just looked up and said, hang on a minute, I think your mouth is writing checks your body can't cash. Which I just thought was brilliant.
It's probably a good strap line for the podcast, to be honest. I'm looking at the Burning Sky website in terms of their web shop, and
funny you should say that.
I'm semi-tempted to just get like one of everything, including the bottles, and just accept them my bank account. Except that I'll be poor for a while. Because especially
prices on most of the beers on their website.
Yeah, they're really well priced. I remember having a dark beer from Burning Sky.
Yeah, so they do a porter, which is amazing.
Yeah,
they do on the website now. They've got an imperial stout or something. I think.
I saw that, yeah.
Before the dawn, is that the one?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Arise. Arise is amazing.
£6.80 for what I'd imagine is a like a 420 can. That's a pretty good price. For 440, sorry, 440 can.
Yeah,
£6.80 for an imperial stout from a
£6
brewery.
It's even better.
£6.20 for a brewery with this pedigree. That's a really good price.
I mean,
and it is it's a 440 can. So
yeah. You look at their bottles like the Saison Anniversaire, if they've still got any left, that's only like 12, 14 quid, and that's been sat in wood for nearly a year. So you put it into context. So that the beers they make are out of this world. So yeah, Arise is just a great smashable. I think it's like 4.2%. Indecision Time Tail Crush 3%, but it's absolutely amazing at 3%. So yeah, I mean, I'll stop piping on about them because I just think they're great.
I'm interested in Assemblage number 3, which comes in a Magnum size.
Yes,
it is 29 quid, but that is 1.5 liters. What is probably incredible.
All we need to know after this wee section of the podcast is that number one, Owen's going to be poor for a while, and secondly, Andy. Tricky has yet to review his commercial.
He did.
It's me. I haven't got it.
It's Owen who hasn't done this. Come on, Owen, let's get this done.
So, all right, let me get it done. So, this is an absolutely mental beer. It's incredible. It is a triple gelato ice cream sour.
Ooh.
It's from a brewery I've not heard of. 2 breweries, in fact, because it's a collab. It's from Funky Fluid. Has anyone heard of Funky Fluid?
I mean, like literally, the name of the beer and the name of the brewery has just massively put me off.
Well, be honest,
hold your judgment.
Nope.
I mean, come on.
Hold your judgment.
I know, but like literally, if you could put 2 words together that make you think more of jizz, I don't know what they would be.
I think that's a channel on OnlyFans.
Manjus.
Yeah, it maybe is
IPA.
It maybe is a Manjus IPA. No, it's a triple fruited Manjus.
Latest beer from Man Fat Brewery is.
Right. You lot, keep it down. I'm doing my beer review.
Sorry, Owen, you can't.
It's a collab. It's a collab between Funky Fluid and a Polish. I think it's a Polish brewery called Siberia, and this is a 9%. It's a 9%, like double fruited. It's not triple fruited. It is plums and blackcurrant. But I think they're kind of going for like it
just gets better.
There's actually 2 plums. There's just 2 plums on the can. Yeah. But they're going for like a plum and blackcurrant like pie because it's also got cinnamon in it.
Oh, I love that.
Honestly, I'll show you the beer. It looks.
There's nothing about that sounds
pours,
good. No, cinnamon in a beer is so good.
Like fromage frais. And it is so
struggling
thick.
with just everything that you're saying right now,
mate. But it's amazing. It's like it's got such it's so chewy.
You had to be there, right?
It's like drinking a liquid yogurt. It's got amazing fruit flavors. It's not too cloying.
Sour and cinnamon probably works really well.
I'm not actually picking up the cinnamon in there, but I think it's probably creating like an interesting kind of.
Is it not like a kind of crumble thing? Owen, like a crumble pie.
It is like. I mean, they're really nailing that. It's. I mean, okay, it's not a beer for everyone, right? Not everyone's going to be interested in this.
That sounds like a beer I would love.
I'm not convinced you'll be able to talk after you finish drinking it in 9%, right?
Owen's going to just slump in that
Hoddy,
chair.
Have you listened to the podcast before?
That's at the end.
It's not a podcast if I haven't drunk an 8% plus beer in the commercial. So
it's the law.
Yeah, I mean it's tangy. It's not super sour, but it is quite. It probably gets you about here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pull that back.
But what gets you is just the fruitiness and the thickness of this beer. It is a chunky beer.
Chunky monkey.
and for me, like it's so ridiculous that I'm really enjoying it.
Good.
Yeah.
Very nice. I wasn't
right. I've held my tongue
slipping down your throat, but that'd be pushing.
Very good, very nice.
I've held my throat, my tongue for long enough. When you said there's 2 plums, look at the can, there's 2 plums, and then you pulled up a can of what can only be described as some very sore, very poorly plums. I was quite concerned, I'll be honest with you, mate. Yeah. I'm concerned about that beer. I'm no. Just no.
It looks like a mate's condom wrapper as well.
There's
some great
there's some kind of like light up plums on the can art.
It's like it's like a hologram thing.
You've got holographic
like
plums on there.
Holographic plums.
Makes it so much better.
Yeah,
it's definitely going to taste good.
Can we? I mean, I love the fact that you've given that as much passion as you have, Owen. But please, could we move on?
No,
because talking about
about it for a little bit longer.
Your bruised, bloodied plums,
funky fluid. All right, leave me to enjoy my funky fluid.
Is it a good beer?
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
That's all that matters. Right.
There you go.
Where were we? So we were trying to get guests onto the podcast. But I think one of the things that I'm interested in, and you, to be fair, you've covered 90% of this. There's really only like one, maybe 1.5 more points to cover in this podcast. Given the fact that you won the competition, and I appreciate what you said about the way that we ran the competition, and it was best beer wins and all that sort of stuff. And I get it. And that's why we got, I think the entries that we got was the fact that it wasn't pigeonholing anybody into a style.
Yeah.
Would you change anything about that particular beer? And what would you change if you were going to change anything about it?
Not suggesting you do have to change anything about it, but
I thought, even though the IBUs were where, I believe, I didn't get it tested, but I believe the IBUs were where they were supposed to be. To me, there was a little bit too much perceived bitterness in it for my liking. There was just, so what I found with it, when I have it at home, the first glass of porter, for me, in any beer you have, those first couple of sips you have are really important, because that basically just sets the tone for the rest of the beer, right? Is that first impression. For me, that beer, the first impression has a little bit too much perceived bitterness for my liking. There's no hot burn to it, but I just think that perceived bitterness is a little bit, it's just a little bit too much. It needs to be a little bit softer. It needs to be dialed down. I don't think it's the hops. I think it might be the pH or something like that. Maybe needs to be a little bit higher in the finished beer, because I think that can bring out some of the bitterness a bit.
That's interesting, because the fact that the amount of Azaka that you use in the dry hop, I made my house pale ale, which I used quite a large majority of Azaka. Mm-hmm. And what I've discovered is Azaka is quite high in cohumulone.
Correct, yeah.
Which can add that kind of, and this beer had quite a strong perceived bitterness to the beer. So I do wonder if that maybe was the culprit.
Yeah, no, and cohumulone is an area that I've played around with and tried looking at. So you've got hops like Galaxy, which I've kind of to a point given up on, because I just can't get it to do what I want it to do. Because every time I've tried to use it, either it comes across like you're drinking an ashtray, or it's just really prickly. And it just, I think I've spoken to a few people about it. I think harvests maybe kind of 2-3 years after it first came out, because obviously when Galaxy first came out, right, it was just off the scale amazing.
2016, baby.
Yeah, and it's never been the same again since. But you're right, cohumulone is, I always look at that when I look at hops, in particular when I'm going to use them hot side. So for example, in the comp beer, that was 80 grams of Azaka and 20 grams of Mosaic in the Whirlpool, in kind of 28 liters roughly. The dry hop was actually 200 grams of Citra, 100 grams of Azacca and 50 grams of Mosaic. But I think you're right. I think there's something there. That would be the one thing I would change or try to improve. And I'm going to make it again, right? Because I'm my own worst critic, and I think I can make it better. So that's the only area that I think I would play around with. Well, and you do it. You take results. You analyze those results, and then you do it again, and then you compare it back, and you go, "Is that better or not?"
It's worse. That's what normally happens to me.
That's the cornerstone of improvement, isn't it? That's exactly how you make better shit, is by taking what you've got, criticizing it, and seeing if you can improve it.
Well, you actually probably learn more when you try and improve and it gets worse than you do when you try and improve and it gets better.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've made some shit beers, and and I think that's one of the things that, homebrewers need to understand is you're going to make some bad beer.
Yeah.
And there's some people you'll speak to. The only way you'll learn to make good beer is by making bad beer.
Yep.
It's that whole cliche of failure, right? It's
that's right.
Fail in order to kind of improve, right?
And I've had series of infected beers and had to work out where the bloody hell it was coming from. And when I was working through hop stands or whirlpools, and I was trying to maintain whirlpool temperatures, and I was using the element within the Braumeister I used to maintain the temperature during the whirlpool. And I kept on getting all these higher kind of bitterness coming out, and I couldn't work out what it was. And then I worked out that actually the hops were scorching on the element, even though it was still keeping it warm to like 78, 80 degrees. Because the element was heating up, the hops that were near the element were actually generating more IBUs because, the whole volume of liquid, but that area was that much hotter. Do you know what I mean? And you just got to go through this learning process. I suppose it's whether you're in for it for just having some fun and making some beer for shits and giggles, or you actually want to kind of make the best beer you possibly can. So
do you have a right of hypotheses?
Not necessarily. No.
I think that whole thing with the galaxy is definitely a journey that I think pretty much all of us has been on, where it's been like you made that one beer with like 2016 or earlier galaxy, and you're like, fuck me, this is the most amazing hop that has ever
Galaxy maybe something at 8%,
then pretty much for me, I think it was like literally the next time I made a beer with it, it was just grass clippings, like raw. Green, horrible bitterness, hop flavor. I was like, what have I done? And at the time, I was just like, this is clearly my epic failure as a brewer, because I've just done something like completely wrong. And I think that the depressing thing about that was I probably went through about 3 or 4 brews before I started to come to the conclusion, hang on, something's definitely changed with these hops.
I did exactly the same thing. I did exactly the same thing. And you're like, what is going on? I've done this, and there's this, and
right.
I've just given up on it now, and I'm just like, just park Galaxy. It can just sit in there quietly in the corner until it decides to come back and play again.
Listening to what Andy's just said, I do believe that there is some merit to thinking about Galaxy as more of a hop which is suited for higher ABV beers.
Yeah, because it can take it.
Because that alcohol, that residual sweetness from the ethanol can maybe not mask, but certainly dance better.
Yeah.
With a beer which produces such vibrant and at times honestly overwhelming flavors. Because Galaxy is one of those hops, it really can. It pushes the boat out as far as flavor goes, and maybe a 6.5-7% beer would be more suited than a 4% golden ale.
Exactly.
I don't know. I mean,
love and hate.
Love
and hate is a perfect example, isn't it?
I made a house pale that had Galaxy in it, which was what 1/4 of the whirlpool / dry hop. And I didn't get any of that. I was really impressed actually, and it came out really nicely. So it's just a weird hop that you can just get very varying results from. I find it's strange, and I think that's probably where maybe people want to avoid it, just because it's unpredictable. You know.
Yeah, I just think the issue is there was a point early on where you could put it in a beer pretty much anywhere, and it would be amazing. And it changed really quickly, and
as they scaled it up.
And then it was exactly, and then you sort of like went, okay, if I literally touch anything near boiling with it, it's now going to produce something that's just horrific and undrinkable.
Yeah, anything over
like
70 degrees, it's like you're dead.
I'm at that point with Enigma at the moment, because I've maintained faith in Enigma for 4 brews now, and each one of those 4 brews has turned out honestly fucking horrifically undrinkable. And I've not so much wasted hops as I have really started to, exactly as you've done, Martin, kind of delve deep into the brewing process and kept pH samples and kept gravity readings and kept. I've actually done. It's gonna sound really fucking sad.
It's all coming out now. It's like a confession, isn't it?
I've done like viscosity readings.
I thought it was about to say crack. But,
I've done sorry. I haven't done crack for a while.
Here's the links to his OnlyFans page.
Yeah. Oh, no. Dirty Brewers. Yeah, that's the one. But no, the viscosity readings that I got from it, and only because I read a piece of research that said that the high levels of cohumalone can actually have an effect on the viscosity of a liquid. Not much of one, but it can alter it, and it's due to protein binding and stuff. And the one thing that I kind of got from that was, if I'm extracting so much of the cohumalone from it, maybe that's having an add-on effect with the binding within the final product, and maybe that's causing the increased bitterness levels that I'm perceiving. And maybe if I was to add it purely in the dry hop after I've added like Irish moss, whatever you protoflock, maybe that would reduce the protein levels enough so I wouldn't get that. But I've not actually got the time to brew at the moment to be able to check that hypothesis.
I mean it's a valid question, isn't it? Because like hot burn and harshness and a lot of that sort of stuff, in my mind anyway, essentially comes from hot particles being in suspension, because you're getting them on your palate, so you're perceiving them because your taste buds are detecting them. So there is an argument there to say that protein molecules that are in suspension, because they are attaching to the cohumalone, which is that harsh I want to say chemical, but that gives you that perceived harshness. That I suppose if the two are binding, I've never really quite understood what the cohumalone does, from the hop, what it does, and why the higher levels of cohumalone, why it gives it that more perceived bitterness. I've not spent the time to try and understand or read why you get that.
With a fellow scientist and being able to explain these ideas and have somebody properly, I mean, no disrespect to you guys, but properly understand what it is I'm trying to say.
Chris, while we all just stare blankly into the background.
Well, should we just leave, Chris? You can just carry on with Hoddy if you want.
It's just interesting.
That's all right. Just mute us. Straight.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting to be able to think through these ideas in a vocal sense and have somebody say, "Do you know what? That's actually got some merit because of." And this is what science is all about. It's the bouncing of ideas off of other people and trying to
100%. And this is what I'll shout out for the guys in the WhatsApp group I'm in with, and I'll recommend this highly to any homebrewers at home, is join a homebrew club or whatever. But the best thing you can possibly do is get a group of mates like you have, like you four, and like I've got with my other 3 guys, and get in a WhatsApp group or just get in a group with you and share beers with each other and share ideas and knowledge and send each other beers and take the piss out of each other. And but because actually the best way you can get better is from learning from other people.
Yeah.
And the guys I'm in the group with, they're amazing. Dave, Leon, and Dan. They're amazing because we send each other beers, and one of the guys had a real issue where he was getting this earthiness with every beer he made, and we all just tasted them and worked through and just came up with ideas. And definitely it's the, if you want to get better, definitely that's the thing to do.
Yeah, you needed to stop doing my fuggles.
Stop putting fuggles in every beer, Dan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's not a bad hop.
Yeah.
No, you're quite
opening
right.
the lid and taking a picture and going, is this infected?
Yeah, lift the lid, why not? I think more heads are better than one, right?
I think that this is definitely been an eye opener for me, this podcast, and thank you for being my fellow geek, Martin.
I'm always a geek. I mean, there is a reason. Well, I guess it's kind of building up to it. So there's a reason why I'm a geek and why I've kind of worked into this as much as well as I am actually planning on going pro in the not too distant future as well. So hence the reason why I'm very much focused on making sure I understand as much as I can when that happens, because like we talked about at the end of the day, people have got to want to pay for your beers, right? So
yeah.
Well, send us a case, mate. We'll talk about.
And Hoddy, there's a bit of a backstory in your relationship with Unity as well, and Jimmy, right?
Yes. So I bought Jimmy's old brew house off of him about 2 months before COVID. So
what size is that?
So that's 10 hec. So six brewers barrel, so 1,000 litre.
Jeez, oh.
So I bought his old brew kit from him. It was November time. So he'd been in his new place 3 or 4 months. Funnily enough, I'd been talking to him a couple of months prior to that, because the people that made his old brew kit, I was like, are they any good? What's the quality like? Yada yada. Spent a bit of time with him down in his old unit, talking through stuff. And then he got in contact out of nowhere saying, actually, the people that were going to buy the brew kit have fallen through. Do you still want it? And I was like, do you know what? Actually, yes. I haven't got the place where I was supposed to go, and there's a very long-winded story that goes with that. But that's not going to come off. I can put it in storage. I'll take it off you now, put it in storage, and then in the new year of 2020, because 2020 is going to be a great year, right, for all of us. And it'll all be good. And it's been in storage, funnily enough, ever since, and it's hopefully coming out of storage in a month or so.
Yay!
What's the name of the brewery? With the brewery going to be?
So I've been repping this evening.
I can't read it.
Something brewing.
Maverick. So
Maverick.
Maverick. So you can see the M. The star.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So is that a nod to Top Gun, or?
I'm sorry, but if the name of your first beer is not because I was inverted, there's something wrong.
That's right. Yeah.
Need for Speed.
So I'd like to just point out the whole concept and idea for all of this came up way before we even knew about the Maverick movie. So the idea about it is about not being afraid to just do something a bit crazy. And it's trying to empower people to do something a bit crazy, like I am. I'm kind of, going to open a brewery in probably what is the most craziest time. We're in a world crisis of energy and God knows what. But actually, I think out of it, I want people to kind of, think about actually do something a bit crazy, even if it is stop drinking brown beer or Stella. Do something a bit crazy, do something a bit maverick, because one of the ideas with the business is that I want it to try and, without sounding like a do-gooder, do good in the community. So one of the ideas with it is I want to use the business to help people retrain and find new jobs, because brewing is a great industry because it's got so many facets to it. It's got graphic design, sales, it's got engineering, it's got chemistry, it's just got everything in it. And actually, what I want to be able to do is try and use the brewery to help people retrain and find a new job, because particularly things like COVID and stuff like that, there's people out there that are just, without work. And, there's people, people that have come into the country from elsewhere in Europe that are unable to get jobs, and kids coming out of school and stuff like that. So that's one of the things I want to use it for. And it's all about just being a bit more maverick. I mean, that's the tagline that goes with it, right? Is hoping people that will be a little bit, and hopefully will not crazy and like crazy, because let's be honest, everyone's done that and everyone's done the kind of thing against big beer. But this is all about actually making people kind of be a little bit braver, to be a little bit different, and not be afraid to be different as well.
Absolutely. Fuck yes.
That's cool. That's very
I'm
cool.
down with that.
Can you promise me you'll make a West Coast IPA called Highway to the Danger Zone?
And there needs to be one called Because I Was Inverted.
Obviously.
Just keep throwing the names at me.
Just call one Goose. It's just
one's got to be called
exactly.
Goose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, and
that's a limitless well of beer now.
And there has to be
the Maverick.
You can be my wingman. That has to be on there.
Yeah, you can.
No, mate, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Cool.
Well, to be fair, props to you for waiting until the last 5 minutes of the podcast to tell us that you're opening a brewery.
What a great thing to finish on as well. Though,
well,
that's amazing.
And it's been a real kind of like wrench internally, particularly with everything that's gone on over the last couple of years. I buy the kit, and then COVID happens. And then, without getting into the details, we can talk about it on another podcast on another day. I had a unit lined up. I did a crowdfund, raised loads of money, but then I had the premises. Basically, they pulled the lease from me at the last minute. And we can talk about people in the SBR committee that might have had something to do with that stitched me up massively, and stuff like that. And then come through, and then negotiated on a few places that fell through, and then this place came up, and then I entered the comp, and then winning the comp for actually just designing and making a really good beer that was critiqued by people in the industry that said it was really good. That actually was really affirming, in the sense that someone goes, do you know what, actually that's a good beer.
Yeah.
So that
I told
really
you
kind
motherfuckers we were doing good by coming up with that. I told you.
And who said we weren't giving back to the community?
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
No, it's brilliant.
Someone did.
Yeah.
And
Never mind.
Shame on them.
Never mind those people.
Yeah, well,
look at the good we've done.
We know where they were from, right?
Yeah, that's great. Well, best of luck, Hoddy, with that venture.
Definitely,
100%.
Keep us posted.
Let us know when it's there's beers actually, becoming available, so we can pimp them on the pod and
more
get you back on and talk about it more. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. We will most definitely get you back on, as long as you're not on Wi-Fi. Because to be fair, it's been horrible for the picture. And
I live in the sticks. We've got bits of wet string in tin cans where I live.
There's a pigeon carrying a signal somewhere.
Ethernet cable is the future. I think definitely once it's up and running and everything, give us a shout. I mean, send Owen a message or any of us a message. We will sort out a podcast. You can come back on, send us a few beers. We can talk about them whilst we're drinking them and getting hammered. It will have to be a Saturday night, though. Wednesdays are a school night. I'm limited to 2 beers.
Yeah.
So it'll have to be a Saturday night, but we will definitely get you back on. And I think it's brilliant that you're doing that, mate.
Yeah.
I'll come down and do a video with you as well for Dudes Brews, if you like.
For sure. Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. No, I mean, you guys are welcome anytime. Like I said, I'm in North Hampshire, so kind of GU 30 kind of region. So
he's gone into the Guildford
far away. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We'll sort it. Awesome. Definitely. Right.
So, yeah, it's been great. Awesome. Thank you very much, guys.
Martin.
Amazing.
It's been a pleasure to have you on. It genuinely has.
It really has.
So, guys, that is episode 52. We are in the bag. Once again, massive thanks to our sponsors, Brewkeg Tap. If you need anything for your kegging or kegland needs, Brewkeg Tap is a place to go. And once again, a massive thanks to all of our Patreons. I'm going to put you guys up so that you can scroll along the bottom of the screen again. And this has been a true eye-opener for me in that when we came up with the premise for the competition, it was kind of like a few people that I spoke to, and I had some emails from some people being honestly quite cruel about the fact that we were running a competition the way that we were. And they're like, well, what are you going to find out from a best beer wins competition? Well, what we're going to find out is what the best fucking tasting beer is. That's why we're doing what we're doing. So, fuck all of those people.
Yeah.
But the bottom line for me is we've clearly hit a note with you. And I know we've hit a note with a few other people with what we've done. I wish you nothing but absolute success in the future with Maverick. I think that's a great idea. And I also really like the fact that you're going to be utilizing your platform, your business to assist people who want to move into a different line of work. I think that's a great thing. But aside from that, because I was inverted, okay. Other than that, guys, I've had a blast with this podcast. I don't know about you people.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, it's been amazing. I'd just like to say, Hoddy said that it was really affirming to do the competition and get that feedback. It's really affirming for us to get your feedback on the competition as to how it was, especially in the light of some of the things that Chris has just mentioned, where there was a little bit of negativity in certain areas towards the way we were doing it. And I'm actually really, really happy to hear how it's how it's gone down with you and how you felt about basically getting that result in the competition, and just everything that you've said on the pod tonight. So thank you for reaffirming with us what we thought could be the benefits of running a competition in that way. That's great. It's amazing, and I've actually just got so much out of talking to you about how you brewed the beer as well. Personally, I think
definitely
it's been brilliant. So thank you.
No, and like I say, it's entirely my pleasure. And I think, I'd hope to think for anyone else that's entered and anything like that, it's about that getting that feedback that really means something. Do you know what I mean? It's all well and good going, well, it wasn't quite to style. Really, what does that mean? It's like, no, actually, that was really good, and really good, and the type of and the quality of people you had helping you guys judge, that means a lot as well, right? Like you were talking about, in the commercial break about the beer you're drinking, about how those beers from Jimmy and Unity are at that next level. Having your beer judged by someone like that basically earns a living out of making beers.
Yeah.
That really counts for a lot. So fair play for pulling it together, chaps, and it's been really appreciated.
Yeah,
nice one.
Our pleasure. Thanks for coming on, Hoddy.
There we go. Episode 52. It's in the bag. If you there is no after party. It's a Wednesday. It's a school night, people. Go to bed. Go to bed. All I'm going to say is thanks very much. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to our Patreons. And we will catch you with episode 53 in the not too distant future. So thanks very much and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Right. Hit stop on Audacity.
And
Hoddy.
stop.
Save project
And save immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Hoddy, if you go to save
There we
project,
go. Hit stop.
under
Done.
file.
I'm going to stop the stream to YouTube now, guys. So thanks for watching, everybody on YouTube, especially
YouTube.
Ron, Martin,
Good evening, good night.
Indeed,
Swedish
YouTube.
Chef,
Cheers.
and Gary the Hitman Hughes, who's always there. We're going to stop streaming now. Have a good one, and we may catch up with you a lot sooner than you think.
Goodbye.